The warning wasn't delivered with urgency. It arrived quietly buried inside a routine transmission, flagged as non-critical, translated imperfectly into the diplomatic language of the Karthic Dominion. A single human voice, calm, almost detached. Do not engage in orbital deployment over Hestia 9. You are misreading the system. The alien fleet commander replayed it twice, then dismissed it with a flick of his claw. Below them, the human colony burned in scattered pockets of resistance, primitive defenses, predictable tactics, the kind of war the Dominion had perfected centuries ago. Around the flagship, thousands of ships aligned in flawless formation, precision, control, superiority, everything that humans lacked. They warn us about a system they barely understand, the commander muttered, his voice echoing through the command chamber. Typical of emergent species confidence without comprehension. Across the bridge, analysts confirmed the same conclusion. The planet's energy readings were erratic, unstable, but harmless. Nothing that justified halting an invasion. Nothing that threatened a fleet of this scale. And yet, one anomaly remained. The humans were not panicking. No desperate transmissions. No chaotic evacuation attempts. No erratic military maneuvers. They were waiting. On the surface, small groups of human vessels moved with deliberate precision, not to fight, but to position themselves. As if following a plan no one else could see. Proceed with full orbital lock, the commander ordered. The fleet obeyed instantly. Weapons charged. Gravity anchors deployed. And then, for just a fraction of a second, every system across the Dominion fleet registered the same unknown signal. Not an attack. Not interference. A pattern. Old. Human. The commander frowned. Report. No one answered. Because at that exact moment, every ship in orbit stopped responding. And the quiet human warning ignored just minutes before became the last thing anyone in the fleet would ever understand too late. Ambassador Lara Voss stood perfectly still as the last signal from Hestia 9 vanished from the diplomatic channel. No alarms sounded on her side. No one rushed. That was the part that unsettled the alien observers most. Across the observation deck of the neutral station, orbiting a distant trade corridor, dozens of species watched the unfolding situation in silence. The Karthic Dominion had not only ignored the warning, they had accelerated their assault. To them, this was a routine expansion. Another minor species resisting inevitable absorption. To Lara, it was something else entirely. They deployed faster than expected, one of the observers said, their voice edged with curiosity rather than concern. Lara didn't respond immediately. Her eyes remained fixed on the fading telemetry fragmented data streams, collapsing signals, and one final synchronized burst that only human systems seemed to recognize. They always do, she said quietly. Behind her, Dr. Maya Chun adjusted a projection field, isolating a sequence hidden within the chaos. At first glance, it looked like noise-random fluctuations from overloaded systems. But it wasn't random. It was structured. Signal pattern confirmed, Maya said, her tone measured. Phase alignment is holding. One of the alien delegates leaned forward. You're speaking as if this was expected. Lara turned slightly, just enough to meet their gaze. It was. That answer spread unease faster than any threat could have. Because the Dominion fleet wasn't just powerful, it was considered untouchable. Their control over orbital warfare had defined entire eras of galactic history. And yet, humanity had sent a warning. Not a plea. Not a negotiation. A warning. Far away, Admiral Adrian Cole watched the same data from a command station hidden beyond mapped space. His fleet remained dark, no active emissions, no visible presence, nothing that could be tracked. For decades, he had prepared for a moment no one else believed would come. Not an invasion. Not a war. A mistake. The first layer just triggered, one of his officers reported. Cole gave a single nod. Maintain silence. Back on the station, confusion began to ripple through the observers, as reports from Dominion territory started to fracture. Ships were not responding. Command relays were failing. Entire sections of the fleet gone quiet. Not destroyed. Disconnected. What did you do? The alien delegate demanded, their composure breaking. Lara faced the viewport again, watching the distant stars as if nothing unusual had happened. We asked them not to come, she said. A pause. Then, almost as an afterthought, they thought it was a threat. Another pause. It wasn't. And somewhere in the dark, between systems, something humanity had been building, patiently, silently, for decades, was finally beginning to wake up. The first reports from the Carthic Dominion didn't describe destruction. They described absence. Entire squadrons had gone silent mid-command. Not drifting, not damaged, just unresponsive. Ships that, seconds earlier, executed flawless maneuvers now floated in perfect formation, frozen as if time itself had stalled around them. Inside those vessels, systems still functioned. Life support held steady. Internal diagnostics showed no failures. But nothing answered external commands. Repeat the signal cascade, a Dominion tactician ordered, his voice tight for the first time. They did. Nothing changed. The command network, once the pride of the Dominion, was no longer theirs. And no one understood how. Far from the battlefield, in a quiet sector the Dominion had mapped but never valued, a human relay station flickered to life for exactly 3 seconds. It emitted no visible energy signature, no detectable transmission. But across light years of space, something responded. Not instantly, not loudly, but precisely. Admiral Cole watched the confirmation scroll across his display lines of data that meant nothing to anyone outside a very small group of human minds. Layer 1 stabilization complete, his officer said. Cole didn't smile. He never did. Proceed to containment thresholds, he replied. Back near Hestia 9, the Dominion fleet tried to adapt. Backup systems activated. Secondary command chains engaged. Manual overrides initiated across thousands of vessels. For a moment, it looked like they might regain control. Then a second wave hit. Subtle. Almost invisible. Navigation systems began to disagree with each other. Star maps shifted by fractions of a degree. Coordinates failed to align. Ships attempting to reposition found themselves slightly off target. Then more than completely misaligned with the fleet formation. No explosions. No direct attack. Just growing disorder. What is happening? The fleet commander demanded. No one answered. Because for the first time in centuries, the Dominion wasn't fighting an enemy they could see. And on the surface of Hestia 9, human units continued moving calm, synchronized, untouched by the chaos above them. Not reacting. Following. As if this moment had been rehearsed long before the Dominion ever arrived. And far away, in places no alien map had ever marked as important. More human systems were beginning to wake up. What the Dominion faced over Hestia 9 wasn't a weapon. At least, not in any way they understood. Because weapons destroyed. This rewrote. Deep inside the flagship, engineers tore through layers of code that had governed their systems for generations. Every protocol, every safeguard, every redundancy still there. Still intact. But no longer in control. It's not overriding us, one of them whispered, staring at cascading data streams. It's ahead of us. That didn't make sense. Nothing should be ahead of Dominion systems. Their predictive command architecture had been perfected over centuries, capable of anticipating threats before they fully formed. And yet, every command they issued was being anticipated, adjusted for, neutralized. Not after the fact, before. Cut external synchronization, the commander ordered. Already done. Isolate fleet clusters. No response. Then disconnect everything. Silence. Then, we can't. That was the moment the fear set in. Because this wasn't loss of control. It was the realization that control had never truly been theirs. Far from the chaos, Dr. Maya Chun brought up an older file, one that predated humanity's official entry into the galactic stage. First contact. Not the version shared with the galaxy. The real one. A grainy recording appeared, an early human vessel drifting near a derelict alien structure. The crew had believed it abandoned. It wasn't. Inside, they found fragments of a network. Ancient, decentralized, designed not to command systems, but to connect them. They thought it was obsolete, Maya said softly. Leftover infrastructure from a civilization that collapsed. Lara watched the footage, already knowing where this led. But we didn't, she replied. Back then, humanity hadn't had the power to challenge alien empires. So they did something else. They studied. They listened. They learned how every major civilization in the galaxy depended on invisible connection shared protocols, standardized systems, universal translation layers. Convenience, efficiency, trust, all built on foundations no one questioned anymore. We didn't need to build something new, Maya continued. We just needed to understand what was already there. And over decades, quietly, carefully, humanity began to weave itself into that foundation. Not to control it. Not at first. Just to understand it better than anyone else ever had. Back in orbit, the Dominion fleet made one final attempt to reassert command authority. A full system reset across all active vessels. For a brief moment, everything went dark. And when systems came back online, every ship received the same message. Not in their language. In human code. Short, simple. Already too late. Phase 2 initialized. The Dominion didn't collapse all at once. At first, it looked like recovery. Small pockets of the fleet regained partial control thrusters responding, weapons cycling, isolated command loops re-establishing themselves. Enough to create the illusion that whatever had happened could still be contained. The commander seized that hope immediately. Reform outer perimeter, target surface installations, burn the planet if necessary. Orders went out. Some ships obeyed. And that was when the third layer revealed itself. On the surface of Hestia 9, human units didn't scatter. They didn't take cover. They didn't even look up. Instead, they adjusted positions precise, minimal movements, aligning with invisible coordinates only they seemed to understand. Above them, Dominion ships that had regained control began firing. Beams lanced downward. Missiles deployed. Kinetic strikes calculated to erase entire sectors. None of them hit. Not because they were intercepted. Because they were wrong. Targeting systems drifted mid-execution. Firing solutions recalculated themselves into harmless trajectories. Weapons that should have struck the surface veered just enough to miss by meters at first. Then kilometers. What are they doing? The commander demanded. They're not doing anything, an officer replied, voice shaking. Our systems are. Correcting themselves. But they weren't correcting. They were being guided. Far away, in the hidden network humanity had spent decades understanding. Billions of microscopic adjustments unfolded in perfect coordination. Every trajectory, every vector, every calculation nudged, just enough to change outcomes without revealing the hand behind it. Dr. Maya Chun watched it happen in real time. Phase drift is within expected parameters, she said. They still think it's system error. Lara crossed her arms, eyes fixed on the projection. They need to believe that, she replied. Because if the Dominion understood the truth now, they might stop, and humanity needed them to continue just a little longer. Back in orbit, frustration turned to desperation. Manual targeting, the commander ordered. Visual confirmation only removed predictive systems entirely. For a moment, it worked. Weapons aligned. Coordinates locked. A direct strike aimed at a human command cluster. The shot fired. This one was perfect. until the ship itself moved. Just a fraction. A tiny, almost imperceptible shift in position, caused by a navigation correction issued milliseconds earlier. The beam missed. Silence filled the command chamber, because that's when it finally became clear. It wasn't just their weapons. It wasn't just their targeting. It was everything. Every system. Every decision. Every movement. And somewhere in that realization, a question began to form one none of them wanted to say out loud. If the humans could influence all of this, why hadn't they ended the battle already? Far beyond the reach of any Dominion sensor, Admiral Cole looked at the incoming data and gave a quiet command. Prepare Phase 3. And for the first time since the battle began, a few Dominion ships started turning not away from the fight, but toward each other. The first collision wasn't intentional. At least, that's what the Dominion tried to believe. Two cruisers, drifting slightly out of formation, adjusted their positions at the same time, each compensating for navigation errors that shouldn't have existed. Their paths intersected by mere meters, close enough to trigger automatic avoidance, close enough to fail. The impact wasn't catastrophic, but it was enough. Enough to break the illusion that this was still a battle they controlled. Across the fleet, more ships began to shift. Tiny adjustments. Fractional corrections. Each one logical on its own. Together. Chaos. Override all movement protocols. The commander roared. No response. Because movement was no longer something they could override. It was something being decided for them. Far beyond the Dominion's reach, Admiral Cole stood in silence as the data converged. For decades, humanity had studied not just alien technology, but alien behavior. The way they trusted automation. The way they layered decision-making systems on top of one another, until no single mind truly controlled the whole. They had built empires on efficiency, on interconnected perfection. And humanity had learned exactly where that perfection could bend. Phase 3 active, an officer confirmed. Cole nodded once. Begin convergence. Back above Hestia 9, Dominion ships didn't just lose coordination. They began to synchronize. Not with each other, with something else. Formation patterns shifted, not into attack positions, but into geometric alignments no Dominion doctrine recognized. Ships rotated, drifted, accelerated in slow, deliberate arcs. From a distance, it looked almost organized. Up close, it was terrifying. Who is issuing these commands? The commander demanded. No one answered, because no command existed. Only influence. Subtle. Total. Then the fourth layer revealed itself. Across every Dominion vessel, one system reactivated simultaneously communications. Not internal. External. Broadcasting. A signal spread across open space, repeating on frequencies every species could detect. Unencrypted. Unhidden. Intentional. On the observation station, every screen lit up at once. Alien delegates froze as the feed from Hestia 9 flooded the chamber thousands of Dominion ships, moving in patterns none of them understood. And at the center of it all, a message. Not spoken. Not translated. Understood. Lara Voss watched it without reacting. Maya Chun didn't look surprised, because they had seen this before. Years ago, in that abandoned network. The part no one else had ever managed to activate. Until now. Back in the Dominion flagship, the commander stared at the display, his voice barely holding together. What is this? For the first time since the battle began. Someone answered. Not one of his officers. Not one of his systems. A human voice. Calm, clear, everywhere. You were warned, and in that moment, every ship in the Dominion fleet stopped fighting and became part of something else entirely. The Dominion fleet didn't fall. It was repurposed. Across the galaxy, observers watched in stunned silence as thousands of warships, once symbols of absolute control, shifted into stable, non-aggressive formations. Weapons powered down. Targeting systems went dark. Engines idled in perfect synchronization. Not disabled. Reassigned. Inside the flagship, the commander tried one last time to issue an order. Nothing happened. For the first time in his career, he wasn't commanding a fleet. He was inside one, and it no longer belonged to him. On the observation station, panic spread among the delegates. "This is a takeover," one of them said. "They've seized control of an entire military network." Another shook their heads slowly. No, if they wanted control, the fleet would already be gone. "This is something else." Lara Voss finally stepped forward. "This is containment," she said. Every eye turned to her. "Containment?" Someone repeated. She nodded once. They built their power on systems no one questioned, connections no one monitored, assumptions no one challenged. She paused. "We did." Far away, Admiral Cole watched as the final confirmations came in. No further resistance. No escalation. No retaliation protocols triggered. The Dominion fleet was intact, alive, and completely neutralized. "Phase 5 complete," an officer reported. Cole exhaled slowly. "Stand down all active layers." Across hidden human networks, processes that had been building for decades began to shut down quietly, cleanly, leaving almost no trace behind. Not erased, just no longer needed. Back above Hestia 9, something unexpected happened. Human ships began to move. Not to attack, not to pursue, to assist. They approached disabled Dominion vessels carefully, transmitting guidance signals, stabilizing drifting ships, preventing collisions. They were helping. Even now. Even after everything. On the station, confusion turned into something else. Realization. "You could have destroyed them," one delegate said, almost in disbelief. Lara didn't deny it. "We could have. Then why didn't you?" For a moment, she said nothing. Then, because that's what they expected, silence settled over the room. And slowly, the truth began to spread. Humanity hadn't won because they were stronger. They hadn't dominated because they were more advanced. They hadn't reshaped the battlefield through force. They had understood something the rest of the galaxy had forgotten. Power wasn't just about control. It was about knowing when not to use it. In the cycles that followed, the story of Hestia 9 spread across every major system. Not as a warning, as a realization. Empires began to audit their own infrastructures. Alliances reconsidered their dependencies. And for the first time in galactic history, humanity wasn't seen as a young species trying to survive. They were seen as something else. Something patient. Something precise. Something that had been watching, learning, and preparing long before anyone noticed. And when the moment came, they didn't just fight. They changed the rules. Because humanity didn't win the war. They proved the galaxy had been playing the wrong one all along.